you're saying Proverbs 31 is wife of a king. If you hit that. You know, so you're leveling
wife of
up.
a king or a Viking chieftain.
Sure.
You know, like Proverbs 31, there's like the kind of guy who would impress and win the love and respect of a woman like that would be some dude.
Yeah.
You know, for sure. And I think that's actually a big piece. So there are plenty of guys who would read a fictional girl character and actually be off-put and threatened. You know, it's like, you know, she's more of a man than I'll ever be. It's like, correct. And that's not her fault. That's your fault.
Met a ghost of a king on the road when I first fell. Fire burning to my knees I fell. Met a ghost of a king on the road.
Okay, we're here. Welcome to Sassaf.
Here it is. Stories of Soul Food after a brief hiatus.
Is it? Did we take a hiatus?
We did.
Okay.
Yep. You were cranking.
I flaked.
Well, I don't know if that counts as flaking. We borrowed Nate for a wonderful video that you can visit at noquarternovember.com. Although I guess right now it's just the Canon team. That's why you get the flag behind it.
Why do we have the flag up here? Where's blah blah?
It's just during No Quarter. Blah blah's not here.
But we're taking prisoners here at Stories or Soul Food.
No Quarter is not. Yeah, maybe so. I think it's not there so that you will talk about blah blah and wonder where it is.
Yeah, wonder like where is blah blah black sheep? Everybody buy blah blah black sheep.
Yep.
I don't mind flying under a Jolly Roger. That's fine.
Yeah, but I think it is kind of the vibe for Stories of Soul Food all the time.
Yeah. I don't know. I do feel like we take a lot of prisoners.
Do we make?
We're so gentle.
I guess for the most part, I qualify. So maybe I need to
actually
stop.
I kind of want to change our podcast name to Hearts and Minds.
Hearts and Minds. Do you want to explain that joke?
No. Just leave it. We'll let it sit there. Let it sit there. The joke is that we here at Stories of Soul Food are all about winning hearts and minds and taking lots of quarter and many prisoners. None of this is true. We're actually about getting in a small room where there's just the two of us and we forget there's an audience and we have a conversation.
And I ask Nate questions about things. We discuss favorite stories.
So we have fun conversations and forget that they're public.
Right.
So,
I mean, I think we have a variety of stuff to talk about, but perhaps starting with a couple questions and then maybe we move on to, I haven't finished the whole first season of The Bear, but I was curious.
Okay.
That one's there.
Yeah.
We've got, I started watching.
I've got a movie recommend today.
Oh, wow. We're busy.
Got a movie reco.
We do need to pick another.
Today's the first day of basketball season for me. So I'm afraid the sweats are once again justified.
Yeah.
As opposed to unjustified. So first basketball practice and after this podcast.
By the time this airs, also Future Men, the docuseries, to which you contributed a little.
Yeah.
Will be out. And
I actually, so basically I'm ready to talk about sports again. I actually probably get asked about that almost more than any other thing we've ever talked about on the podcast.
I think it could be worth just having a sports episode because I think it reaches fever pitch, especially in our small community. And I think in many, how important are they?
100.
And then
that's how important. Is 100 important.
Is that 10 points too important? Do we need to subtract slight importance and emphasize other things? So I think these are worthwhile questions.
No.
As we said though, this is not the Hearts and Minds podcast.
So today I'll be talking a little bit about girls sports.
Wow.
Today. I'll see if I can fit it in. What are we actually talking about? And I'll see if I can tangent into girls sports.
Well, I think we should just tangent into sports because it was really just a couple questions that have been sitting on the to ask. And as we come up on Thanksgiving, this is a timely question right here.
Great.
So this is a tough one based on our fighting episode. Our last episode, you might remember, is how being pickled in conflict makes your kids resilient and able to stand up for themselves and not try to fit in.
I actually have so little memory of that podcast for whatever reason.
You told stories about getting thrown out of class.
Yeah, maybe it's just because they're such old stories and I felt like I'd already told them probably on this podcast.
Some stories you repeat on this podcast, those I don't think had made it out.
Yeah. So I know I have told those stories.
I heard from fellow Stories or Soul Food listeners about their own fights in classrooms. None of them had been thrown out though, so they all felt like they had some aspirations to strive for.
I mean, I know my favorite moment in all of that was when the teacher threw chalk at me.
Yeah.
And drilled the girl in front of me. And that still is such a vivid, beautiful memory.
I wonder if the girl in front of you remembers.
I'm pretty sure she does.
Yeah.
At the time, a professor hit her with a piece of chalk that she was trying to throw at the guy behind her. Yeah, I'm willing to bet that she remembers that.
Oh, good.
I would remember it. Wouldn't you remember if a professor pegged you with chalk?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember a marker being thrown at a kid who'd fallen asleep. I remember that pretty vividly. That was a good one.
Yeah.
Although it missed. So that
it wasn't as
hence the need for this episode on sports. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so here's some advice. This is such a complicated question. You never know where all these stories are coming from, but this is coming from a reader who listened to that episode about when to throw down, and he says, "My father's trans and still professes Christianity. The rest of my family is still living in super hippie woke." Refers to him as a woman, bigot, the whole story. And then this guy is trying to decide, what do I do? I'm about to have kids. What do my wife and I do as we're heading into having children? And how soon do I explain to my family? Because remember, we talked about in our episode of when do you talk to your kids about the world and how to divide it. So this is kind of a giant smorgasbord question where you get thrown all the questions.
It's a big one.
And he just says, what can I do? I agree. We talked about explaining the reality of the pride flag and what all that means and age appropriately. But then the whole conversation of it just being central to your family, especially around the holidays. What do you do about that? When your aunt is calling, your grandpa a she and your mom and dad are saying no. Obviously this is kind of the worst of the worst, but I think it's happening more and more.
Yeah, that's pretty rough.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in that particular situation, I don't think you could really have anything to do with them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, and the question is whether you don't have anything to do with them because they won't have anything to do with you. And that's preferable as opposed to you cutting them off. But at the same time, you can't raise your babies around a dude like that, being like that. So,
right.
And again, I don't know all the particulars. So if it's,
we can't,
and you don't have kids yet, you don't have that going on. I think it'd be better to actually be there and just have the conversations. Don't pretend, and be willing to have the relationships, but do not drop it.
Right.
Like do not pretend and avoid. Like actually be there with light and understand that it'll be hard conversations, and they will either come around or they won't want you there anymore ever. And that'll happen naturally, and it'll happen on their side as opposed to you cutting them off, because they are family. He is your father. You do have to find a way to honor your father. You have to find a way to honor your father more than he is honoring himself.
Right.
Like that's, I think that one of the things that would be hard to do, but I would go pull a Grandpa Jim and say, probably write him a respect letter. Actually
right.
start there.
Your grandpa said what? Settle down, write the letter, because it gets everything all out at once, send it off, and then
write a respect letter to your dad, especially if there's a lot of conflict, if there's a lot of hardship, if there's a lot of disagreement. Focus on those things which you can thank God for.
Yeah.
And that you can respect in your father, and ignore everything else. Don't include anything about that, and just simply send a respect letter.
Right. Because that's what we're told to do.
Yeah. Honor your father.
Yeah.
And as hard as it is, we're not told to do it because they deserve it. We're not told to do it because it's easy. We're told to do it because we're supposed to do it. And so do it. And that does not mean lie to your father. It doesn't mean participate in your father's lies, but honor your father, love your father, do what you can there, and understand that probably won't answer the question about raising kids, having babies, all that kind of stuff, because it'll force the issue and resolution will come, or the gulf will become more longstanding.
Yeah. And then that also, as you're looking forward to your own kids and explaining what's going on, it becomes much simpler to explain.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of times this reminds me of stories that I've heard of, when that one kid leaves the faith and brings the girlfriend to stay over, what do the parents do when someone shows up with a girlfriend on vacation and you're like, no, you can't sleep together.
Yeah.
Right. That sort of same line. And the temptation for Christians is always I'm not sure why we do this, but a lot of people's temptation is to be like, oh, it's okay. They don't believe what we believe.
Well, conflict avoidance is deeply ingrained in evangelical kindness and the idea of being loving.
Right.
So
I guess the pirate flag and blah, blah behind us both would have worked.
Yeah. So it's not being loving is being honest. I've had conversations with people before where I've told them I'm respecting you with honesty. I am not going to disrespect you with patronizing euphemisms.
Yeah.
I will tell you the truth. And I'm going to tell you the truth. And that doesn't mean you're going to like it. It's going to feel like, some alcohol on a wound trying to actually like disinfect. It's going to burn. It's not going to go down easy, but it is offered out of affection and respect. It's not, it's really, so easy to think that kindness is tiptoeing around and avoiding and creating a neutral space in which terrible things can happen. And so, it's one of those things where if Uncle, Felipe in my family decided to be in a polyamorous relationship and wanted to come to Thanksgiving, like I may or may not do that and then have the hard conversation. Depending on how old my kids were and whether I thought their immune systems were up enough. But if they were just little and it was going to be wildly confusing, then I would avoid. If my kids were the age they are right now, I'd be like, yeah, come on.
Right.
Like, you're welcome at the table. We're going to eat together, but we were also going to have very real talk.
Yeah.
So if you want the turkey that bad that you're willing to pay the toll of having this conversation, then you're welcome.
Right.
But it's really a question of who's got the steering wheel, who has the center of gravity, and I
think you've said before, and I've heard it from your dad too, of his focus on his kids was the primary.
Yeah.
Like he didn't owe it to the people who were counseling.
Correct.
To have them come in and drive his life.
Correct.
And so I think a lot of new parents do need that reminder. Hey, you are in charge of taking care of your kids.
Yeah.
You're not in charge of blessing that other person first, but even if that would be blessing.
Yep. If you can do both, great.
Yeah. What's that story your dad tells about, or is it the one you tell about coming in a counseling situation and the guy asked the kid one of you guys to leave? I'm trying to remember the story, but I thought
I don't remember that. No bells are ringing, Brian.
Oh shoot.
No bells are ringing.
Yeah, I'm mixing it up. We'll come back to it when I've got the real one.
Yeah.
It was one of those situations where you think, hey, it's my pastor, therefore he owes me. And,
right.
And Doug said, no, I actually owe my kid far more than I owe you.
Yeah. You're in my house.
Than I owe you.
I don't remember it. I do remember a pretty glorious men's group moment where we were all there as a family and a guy came in. I think the men's forum had been canceled, but he showed up anyway and then ended up, if I remember the story, there's foggy bits around it, but the vivid part is he came in and he took a route to try to get to a seat in our living room by walking through a bunch of houseplants. And like, it just shimmied through. He came in and was just, we were all just like, what are you doing? What's going on? I don't know.
Did you figure out?
No.
Nothing.
No, I don't remember anything except for that image. I can see him. Gotcha. I can see him doing that. And I feel like men's forum had been canceled. He showed up, walked in the house, and led himself through the houseplants. But
that's a good moment.
Yeah, things like that,
So looping back around, that's all part of that honesty conversation. Having those kind of conversations where the honesty is really strict do make it, or straightforward, make it easy to know if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing or not. Whereas I think when you couch it, it becomes much harder to tell. Much more in that sort of emotional, am I making that person happy yet? If not, then I'm going to keep trying. And I was gonna ask, are people in the movie business good at that direct honesty?
No.
Okay.
No, really successful ones are. The people who are really good in that business are. The people who are kind of middle tier executives have an overwhelming, now you see this at every level, but an overwhelming drive to like fawn and flatter and lie. And then as soon as somebody's out of the room,
tear them down
and be like, this is trash. You know, it's not going to, never going to
That
happen.
makes sense to me because most of the interactions I was thinking, I could not imagine the secular publishers that I've run into. I could not imagine them saying that hard truth. And I think I have run into most of the mid tier.
I've seen it. Like I really appreciate it. I see it. There's a lot of guys and gals, different execs at different levels who will really give you direct notes and honesty, and they'll just say it and put it out there. And then there's different corners and different cultures, and the culture varies company to company, but also the more status, in my experience, the more status somebody has, the more they just let the honesty fly because they're not going to get taken down.
Okay.
So they, you know,
so there's a career building.
There's a hierarchy thing of like who's fawning on whom and who could benefit whom and so on. And so the various degrees of dishonesty of like, I might need this relationship later for my own career. So I can't be honest or burn this bridge. I have to backstab. You know, I've seen every possible variety. Well, one of my least favorite moments, but an example of this was meeting with a guy. We were thrilled to have gotten the meeting. We're talking about a project. We're meeting with an A-list talent, absolute movie star, and his manager, his American manager. And because he had different managers in different territories. So it was around the Golden Globes, and we're sitting on a, you know, we're in some stupid bougie hotel, having a drink on the roof, and we're talking about this project, and it's all a love fest, right? Everything's great. He's got a ton of really direct business, practical questions, you know, and the manager is being super enthusiastic and over the top. He gets up to use the bathroom. As soon as he walks away from the table, she leans over to my production partner and to me and says, just to be clear, this is never going to happen.
Oh, no.
I have other plans for him.
Nice.
Like, I know he likes this and he's all excited, but this will never happen. I will make sure this never happens. And I was like, okay. Like, this is interesting. And she was betting, she was placing a bet that her relationship with him was stronger than ours. That if I had tried to tell him that she was doing this, she would just be like, it's a lie, total lie. Why would I do this?
Which alone would probably sour the whole deal.
Yeah. The whole thing's going to go away.
Right.
And did, you know, so
she was correct.
But that
was a sort of radical honesty.
But I preferred it. I definitely preferred it. While she was being dishonest to her client because he wanted this, I preferred that to what I've experienced 100 times, which is just the fawning flattery, and then
later,
then you're just meeting invisible resistance, and you don't know what's happening or where it's coming, and somebody's killing it. So yeah, I still preferred that, you know, by a mile.
Yeah. Okay. Nice.
And the thing is, if you're talking about honesty, it's one of the big beautiful things about sports.
There's our segue.
So there you go. One of my favorite things about sports for kids is objectivity, honesty in the struggle.
Right.
So
you meaning success and failure is out there in front of everybody.
Yep. And also the opportunity to offer a ton of excuses. Every kid, sun was in my eyes, you know, my ankle hurts, all of those things. Sports basically, I think, pressurized. They're like a stress test. They're like a stress test on anybody who's really participating at a high level, all the way down to T-ball. You take somebody at their age, you know, pee-wee soccer, and there's a little bit of a stress test.
Totally.
Like, can you pay attention? Can you do what the coach said? Can you actually work with a teammate? Are you selfish? Are you like rashly angry? Are you tempted to make a ton of excuses? All of your temptations are just going to be heightened. It's, you know, you get into a situation and everything's amplified. And so all the little personality cracks, all the little personality flaws are brought to the surface. And there are a ton of conversations I've had with my kids and a ton of I mean, all 5 of them. There's been a huge amount of personal growth that's come from those hairline cracks, those tiny little flaws or weaknesses that never ever would have shown up.
Yeah.
Because they would never have gotten into a situation where there was that much pressure applied.
Yeah.
And the temptation pops, and then there's the thing that you see, and then the parenting starts and you start working with them.
Yeah.
And for all 5 of them, it's been different.
Right.
Like each of those 5 kids, my youngest being 13, my oldest is 21. And with all of them, that growth and those conversations and different versions of the struggle and the suffering and teamwork and leadership and all the different lessons that have been learned, all of them have been different.
Yeah.
From different temptations and circumstances.
Oh, that's great. One of my little boys, I won't call him out in front of everyone, but finding out that
a coal boy.
Yeah. Finding out that the pressure of having failed was what made him cry.
Right.
And he wouldn't cry. I was like, that was fantastic, because I hadn't seen it before, and he's a beast. But when that happened, like his few failures, I could see the tears would come, and I'd be like, oh, good. There's something to work with him on, because now I know that's sitting under his high performance in other areas, because he's got that little bit of like anxious energy underneath. And the pressure is great because he plays super hard, but it was that I had seen hints of it before as a parent, like, oh, I don't understand why that made him sad. But then you get him on the field and it's all of a sudden, oh, it's because you guys we're losing really bad.
Yeah.
And then that hurts.
Because you messed up, because you missed a shot, because, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big fan of stats. I'm a big fan of, I love track because it's so simple and so objective.
Right.
But even so, in track, there's always those kids who are like, oh, but today my knee, today my ankle, today, my elbow, like something, my breathing, something's weird. It's always there. And so they're trying to find something to change this just objective measurement of how many seconds did it take you to go around the circle? How do we make that more subjective? And so it's not an accurate measure of, what I actually do. One of the best moments in my own personal life, playing football, I had outside containment. So for all those non-football listeners, I was on defense. My job was to not let anybody run around the sideline. So I'm playing defense. I had outside contain, left side. And there's a very fast running back, and he was going for it. And I just got grabbed from behind. I just got held, jersey grabbed, held back. He slipped by me. And I got torched. And I got torched because a player across from me cheated. And there was no penalty called. And I left the field without any sense of guilt. I left it annoyed at this guy who grabbed my jersey, but I did not feel any responsibility. I did not feel any culpability. I did not, zero. And as I was running off the field, my coach started to get into me for losing outside contain. And I started to tell him that I was held, and he knew, he'd seen it. And he grabbed my face mask. he was a very big individual. Face mask came in tight. Big dude, leaned down a couple inches. I was 6'3" at the time, and he came down from about 6'5", 6'6", somewhere in there, and just spittle flecked yell in my face. Good players don't get held.
Good players don't get held.
And I was just like, what? Like,
awesome.
What? And then having the conversation later and in film when we were replaying it and looking at it, and the objectivity of watching game film and just looking at, what are you doing? Why is your body doing this? Why are you physically choosing to do this right here? That was just painful. And he pushed on me like, I don't care what happens. Like, I don't care if he has a knife. You have outside contain. You are responsible for that. And your whole team is depending on you for that. Everybody over here is depending on you to overcome all obstacles, no matter what, and have outside contain. It doesn't matter who's grabbing what, who's kicking, punching, scratching, you have outside contain. And that was a really big light bulb moment for me of just realizing that excuses, real ones, excuses do not absolve responsibility.
Mm.
You know, just it might not be. You know,
they could mitigate punishment, perhaps.
Yeah, they could mitigate
But
punishment. They could mitigate fault, but not responsibility.
Yeah,
That you own your thing. And my job was to turn around and own it to my team. So when I coached junior high football, one of the things I would do is all my guys would be on the 40-yard line, and they'd all get down 3-point stands. And I'd tell them, we're running a 40-yard, down and back. We're doing it on 2 or on 3 or on 1, whatever it is.
That means counting to 1, 2, or 3.
I'd be yelling hike,
right,
twice, thrice, or go.
Yeah.
If I say it's on 2 and I yell go, they're not supposed to go. They're all supposed to stay frozen. Yelling go twice. But if anybody false started, everyone ran except for that person. That person did not run. Everybody else had to go run as punishment. And varying degrees of punishment on how many times it was happening. Sometimes we ran 40-yard suicides, and there was a lot. But that person who screwed up had to start from one sideline, and while everybody else was doing their down and back suicides, had to go and apologize to every player individually. So instead of running, they had to go like eyeball to eyeball with every single teammate, making apologies. Because in my experience as a male and raising 2 male children, I'm sorry, I was wrong, my fault. Those are the hardest words. They are just the hardest words to say. Especially when you're a competitive little boy, or a competitive little man. but those are really essential. They're critical words too. So every player on that team at some point, I'm pretty sure, was walking that 40-yard line, apologizing to every single guy on the squad. And the rapport it built, and the way they started to come to trust each other, and the speed with which they would take personal responsibility and see and correlate their own mistakes and their own lack of discipline to everyone else suffering.
Yeah.
It did a lot. It helped a lot.
Right.
And this is incidentally not a male thing. I mean, we're talking about Future Men's coming out here pretty soon. We're talking about boys right now. This is just as important for girls. And people who try to get on some kind of weird bandwagon about restricting sports for girls just drives me nuts.
Yeah.
It's nuts. So
yeah, we should
it's
dig
insane.
into it.
And I think while you definitely want your daughters to be pursuing it in a way that's, part of their feminine glory, and they're not trying to be dudes, you don't want your guys to try to be girls.
I think Megan Rapinoe is the reason that's happening for a big part, right? I mean, people just see Megan Rapinoe with her purple hair and just
let's put it this way. If people say, man, there's so many lesbians in women's sports. Yeah. Right? How many gay dudes are in the arts?
Yeah.
How many singers?
Very high number.
It's
or too high of a number.
Well, if you think general population.
Right.
If you go over to music, in the world of music, above general population average or below?
Right, definitely above.
Yeah, definitely above.
I'm in the arts. All of them
would
would say, everyone I've ever talked to has been involved in it.
I'm in the arts.
Right.
It's like I work with words. I love poetry. I think poetry is a really important discipline.
Right.
However, if we go through the history of the West and looked at the great poets, how many of them would have struggled with, shall we say, sexual impulse control? Like a huge number.
Right.
A huge number, because they are deep in their feels, and a lot of them, their feels run amok, and they struggle with that. But they're here in the business of emotional expression and all that kind of stuff because they have that elevated sensibility for it. So I'm going to be the last person ever to say, keep your boys from the arts. Like, what on earth? Of course not.
Right. So you're saying that is actually a slope or a consequence that does not follow from the field, right? So
no, at all.
Running high school track does not make you Megan Rapinoe.
No. However, I will say this though, just like in the arts, you're in singing and music, like you could send little boys off to weird culture and send them off to ballet school and have it go wrong. Yeah. You could do the same exact thing with girls in other ways. So if you sent them off and like you were doing a ton of
Right.
You know, we're doing a ton of travel ball, and we're way more about this than we are about relationships and family and the home and everything else. Right. We're all about dominating. We want to win. We want to crush opponents. We want
softball, destruction,
Yeah. So if you start telling your 6-year-old girl in soccer, I want you to crush them. I want you to take their souls. I want you to what's wrong with you? It's have your team's backs, have your team's back, really compete aggressively to the best of your ability, support your teammates, be unselfish. It's all those lessons. Now, could somebody with like tendencies to go try to dominate and be a bully and do all those things thrive in sports? Yeah, they could. Just like somebody who is, struggles with all sorts of like sexual urges could go thrive
in drama,
in drama, in fiction, in poetry, in film, in the things in the areas where I work. Right.
Okay.
So
here's
the question is, can I go over there and be poetic and try to be an artist and really try and yet retain masculinity? And the answer is, of course. Can you go do that in sports and retain your femininity? Of course you can. I think it's ludicrous to say that you can't.
Gotcha. So you're not saying, women can do sports, but they're not trying to win as much as say, because I think what people hear, they say like, if you're not doing the crush, dominate, then you're not pursuing the excellence in the sport the same way that you have argued for in other podcasts.
So I coach girls, I coach guys, right? Yeah. And I have to work much, much harder to coach the girls. It's intuitive as I'm coaching guys. And for
right.
For girls,
what works.
I'm trying to think, and it's very practical in terms of how do I get maximum effort? How do I motivate and reward maximum effort from a female athlete? And if I just try to do it the exact same way, or if I find myself slipping into that, and trying to motivate it the exact same way, I'll find that it just doesn't work.
Yeah. So like a guy, maximum effort, it's pretty direct. Like you just be like, hey, look how much you improved by, way to go.
Well, I'll also be a lot more brutal.
Yeah.
It's like I will be brutally honest with a guy. I'm not a coach who's just always yelling, but I'm willing to pull a guy aside and say very hard things.
Right.
I'm willing to do that with a girl too, but it will be very, very different. It'll be different hard things.
Okay. Like I just want examples now, but I may just be being curious. Just like, what do you say?
So,
like I said, I've only been involved in male sports.
I pulled a guy aside during a game, during a basketball game, and just said, I don't remember the exact words, but between him and me, just said, do you have any testosterone? Like any?
So brutal.
I wouldn't say that.
I think that most people are just going to be.
I wouldn't say that to a girl.
Right.
It's like,
right.
That's not going to happen. And then I went on. I said, also, like, I see your sister's here. Like, she's over there in the bleachers, and she was much younger. I was like, could you give her your jersey real quick and tell her to come over here?
Oh, Nate.
That was one of the meanest things I did.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Did it work?
Yeah.
Okay, that was what I was going to ask.
I was like, here's how, and the thing is, when I say that, what would have been a failure is if I just hurt him or wounded him and didn't actually get him to find another gear and another level of effort.
So what you're
I'm trying to help the kid. I want him to find it. And he was really struggling to downshift. And he had so much athleticism and so much ability and so much potential that he just wasn't ever utilizing. And so I told him, it's like, okay, now I'm subbing you back in. And I want to see you at maximum aggression. And this was basketball. So I was saying, I want to see you in the paint, getting fouled, in contact. Like, I want 3 times this quarter. I want to see you like into contact in the paint. And he went out there and did an awesome job.
Nice.
And I told him afterwards, it was like, that was fantastic. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's what I want to see from you.
Right.
It's like, so it's about trying to find.
So I think people,
performance levers.
Again, you're confusing punishment and correction, which are two very different things. And coaches who use "you wuss, you suck" as punishment.
I would say motivation.
Sure.
So correction, there's punishment. I've kicked kids out of the gym before in practice.
Right. Which would be punishment.
Yeah.
You're not looking, you do want them to improve.
It's punishment / motivation for the next practice.
Right.
I want him to find that desire and that, that ambition, that aggression.
But you're not using it. It's not the fact that you're causing someone pain.
No,
that's not the end goal of it. That's what I mean.
And it's never just like I've said here for parents too. I've said this over and over and over again. Don't ever discipline because they hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
Don't ever be like, don't you know how that makes me feel? You can't coach that way either.
Yeah.
So I tell parents at the beginning of the season, I tell them like, I will be hard on your kids, and all of it will be, I will never lose self-control. Right. I will never just be venting my emotions or venting my own spleen. I will only be trying to help that kid.
Yeah.
So if I think that what that kid needs the most from me is affirmation, then that's what they're getting.
Right.
If I think that kid, the best gift I could give that kid is just a sting of like, oh crap,
right.
Like, wow. And then they get out there and now they're motivated. They're Ferdinand the Bull and they got stung a little bit.
Yeah.
Then that's what I'll give them. I have coaching. I've seen guys where I've coached kids who aren't from great situations. I've coached AAU. I've coached for Logos. I've done a lot of coaching.
Right.
Fair amount of coaching, and only track and basketball and football. So I've done some football, track, girls and guys, and basketball, and little girls basketball. No older girl basketball. But I have in those moments, I've grabbed assistant coaches and just said, "Hey, I don't want you to yell at this guy at all. I know he's not doing what he's told. I know he's not paying attention. There will be no yelling at him. You will pull him aside. It'll be a calm voice. Like, you'll connect with him. You're going to grab his shoulder. You're going to give him affirmation. It's like, because this is a kid from a bad situation at home. And the last thing I want to do is reinforce that.
Gotcha.
So I'm looking to have a relationship with this kid that is unexpected. He's not just assuming, this is what masculinity looks like. Masculinity looks like yelling and anger and all this stuff. I want to show him more thoughtfulness. And there's other guys where they come from a very comfortable home. Everything's very soft. I'm like, guess what this kid's getting? Guess what he needs,
Yeah. What is it? Herodotus, soft lands breed soft men. And I think we've got a lot of soft men.
This is the kid who shows up to basketball practice with a warm loaf of banana bread from his mom that he's just slicing and eating. It's like beforehand, I'm like, okay,
you're going to be puking.
Like this is going to be great. So it's not like boys need to be yelled at. No, they really don't. Some of them do. Some of them don't. Some of them need to wake up. Some of them need to calm down. And so you look at the crew and you have to, as a coach, you have to be, just like I said, my 5 kids, my own children, each of them needed something different from me in response to the temptations and struggles of sports. But I had to be different to each of them. I had to be in a different relationship to each of them. And the same is true of a team. So that's what I'm working at. Right. And that's what I'm trying to get better at. But there is no cookie cutter, one size fits all. Be super quiet and sweet to girls. Be really loud and angry to boys. It's like, absolutely not.
Right.
Like, it's each kid needs something from you. Each athlete needs something from you. And you try to give them that thing that they need. And I incidentally, like, girls track, fantastic. Volleyball, fantastic. I love girls basketball too. Like, I really do. And it's a different kind of lesson, different kind of struggle, different kind of teamwork, and more physicality than you get in volleyball. Right. But you're not out there. You're not wrestling. You're not playing football.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
You're not trying to smash mouth.
You do draw that line there, and I know from watching high school girls basketball. Sometimes you'll watch teams and be like, yeah, that team was coached to be a boys basketball team,
to try to pretend to be the dudes.
Right.
Yeah.
And obviously we don't want that. And similarly, I assume you're against girls football.
Yeah.
And I guess
let's just say I'm very old guard. So for those podcast listeners who think that I'm really cutting edge and extremely of my moment, you'll be shocked to learn that no, I don't like girls wrestling. I don't like girls combat sports. I don't like, I don't like them because I don't think God does. So I'm trying to follow his affections with mine, and I don't like girls in football.
Yeah.
I don't like girls in football for a couple of reasons, but one of the big ones is I don't want guys hitting, I don't want guys hitting girls. I don't want them starting to think that using violence on a woman like that is okay.
Yeah.
I want to just keep that completely out of their.
I still remember some coach sending his daughter onto the 3rd, 4th grade football team to be on an O-line. She was a little bit of a chunky girl. And just that moment of all the boys being told, don't hit her, but also looking at it from the other side as a parent, just why would you send your daughter?
Yeah, why would you do that?
Yeah.
And frequently to toughen them up. They will say to toughen them up, which is just dumb.
Yeah.
I had roommates in grad school who were straight out of the Naval Academy. And they were, at the time, like the closest thing to misogynist that just really didn't like women. And they didn't like women because of the quotas and the women in the academy with them. And it resulted in a ton of animosity. And I think some pretty bad bitterness. Like there was like a weird bitterness and a resentment.
Because they're saying, look at what you guys are getting away with. You don't have to meet the bar.
And it didn't matter. Like a girl could have showed up and
crushed it,
done everything, but the Naval Academy invited her in and was doing this thing, and it just created a lot of resentment there. And I think the rate of rape in the military academies
it's insane.
Is bonkers, and it's hate rape too. It's not good.
I think I read a quarter.
It's
that
really
might be armed forces, but
sure, but it's really bad. It's really bad, and so there's a ton of things. I know a family member talked about running a really long run in the Marines, and it was destroying guys. Guys were collapsing, hips were dislocating. It was one of those kinds of runs. 2 dudes, a girl collapsed. They took her pack, split her pack between them, picked her up, and carried her and dragged her to the end of the run. At the end, she got a little performance medal for finishing. And it's like, okay, afterwards, do those guys have more respect for her or less? It's like, and what does that create? What kind of hate and resentment? Yeah. And the guys shouldn't give in to that hate and resentment. There's no justification for being bitter and resentful and for hating women, but there's plenty of provocation. I mean, you can see the provocation. And I think that there's the 2 reasons to not shove a girl into a football team. I'd say reason number 1 is for the sake of the girl. Like that's number 1. How is this helping her? And reason number 2 is how is it helping all the guys?
Yeah.
Like what's this doing to the team, to the chemistry, to relationships, to their view of, the opposite gender and so on. It's just generally unhealthy. But when it comes to basketball, girls basketball, and this is back to like the arts. It's not, and the stress testing and which personality traits come out. In my girls playing girls basketball, they had to learn lessons and deal with issues and temptations in community and in relationship to these other girls that they never would have had to otherwise. There was not another sport that did it, that pressure cooked that kind of a thing. You have to have each other's backs differently than you do in volleyball. You have to work together as a unit in a different way than you do in volleyball, which I love. I love girls volleyball. And there's a kind of cattiness, like that can come out in a desire for control. And if you look at the temptations, the things that'll show up that you then can address and you can focus on, a lot of that can come out. That one can come out in volleyball as well, or anywhere you have a group of girls who are competing. You can show up with that. And where the guys, you get kind of guys veer into aggressive aggression and bullying behavior or passive aggression and snottiness or, varying degrees of pride, trying to disappear, weakness. Like there's all these different temptations. So some of the same ones show up for girls, but it also reveals a bunch of other temptations in a team, in a unit. Can you have a group of girls who then work together towards a goal and play different roles in that goal and to a lower level than in football, but be willing to put your body on the line for your teammate. And the answer is, yeah, you have to learn all those things.
Right.
You really do. And there's nothing like finding the chemistry and the click of when everybody's working together and they're running the same play and everybody's going where they're supposed to be going at the same moment and the whole thing's working. It sings differently. So track is like just a guts, you against your pain.
Yeah.
Don't let down, especially in relays. I love relays, but you against your pain on behalf of your teammates, which is good. Volleyball, there's a lot of beauty to it. And it's a fantastic sport and tons of fun. But basketball brings its own, its own layer of lessons. So one of my biggest things I'll say here, because you threw this out at the beginning of, are people too into sports?
Right.
Yeah, of course. This is America. So there are people too.
We idolize it every Sunday.
There are people who are too into sports. No question. They sacrifice church. They're sacrificing
family.
Yeah, sometimes they're sacrificing family. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes their whole family is,
That's
participating.
Yeah.
I have less problem with that. But there's times when your kids have closer relationships with teammates than with siblings. I think that's a problem. It's like you actually want them to build, the family bonds and not replace family bonds with team bonds.
Yeah.
But yeah, people absolutely go too deep in it. And I think one of the ways that they do is they over-select. They over-select themselves to a particular sport. And
oh, you mean they're not playing lots of things because they're doing high school. We're
just a volleyball family.
I just do this.
We're a volleyball family. So our girls are going to play volleyball from 3rd grade to 12th grade and hopefully in college. And they won't ever run track and they're not going to ever play basketball and they're not going to do anything else. It's like, well, all you're doing is taking from them a ton of lessons and a different kind of stress test that they would have gained otherwise. So none of this is me thinking about trying to get to professional or college or anything like that. I'm thinking about the growing kid, the kid becoming an adult and the benefit of sports in that kid becoming an adult. I think if you over specialize too quickly, too soon, then I think you rob your kids of a
bunch of different lessons.
Yeah, a lot of different lessons that are
there's nothing
that are there.
There's nothing quite like the individual pain of running cross country or track.
Right.
Like you just don't. There's
nothing like standing at the plate in baseball.
Sure.
There's nothing like.
Not that I ever did that when it wasn't T-ball.
Right. But and it's not to say, oh, you have to play baseball.
Right.
But there are lessons in baseball that don't exist in other sports. There are lessons in basketball that don't exist in other sports. There's lessons in track that don't exist in other sports. There's lessons in football that don't exist in other sports. There's also all these different sports. There's different body types and different roles. You look at a kid who's got a football body. He could come be supporting cast on the basketball court, but he's not going to be just a really guy with a middle linebacker body or a lineman body. He's not going to come be the dominant basketball player. He could be a great role player, but he could go dominate. He can go dominate differently on the football field and really, achieve something. Same thing with baseball. People have different skills and so on. But I think it's really beneficial to kids to play where they're weak, to be in sports where it's not their thing, than to have to play supporting roles. And, it's like but there's my thing where I'm a star. It's like, well, but also there's this fantastic life lesson called not being the most important person.
Because everybody learns it after high school.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, all this to say is in terms of crafting your characters, your kids, sports are fantastic. It's like saying whiskey is fantastic. Do not drink too much.
Yeah.
Don't go all in and replace family bonds with team bonds. Don't lose your church community because you have your baseball community or your soccer community or your football community. Keep the real things real, but these totally confined synthetic situations where you have kids in controlled environments who experience intense want and desire and can pursue it.
Yeah.
But it's entirely synthetic and it doesn't matter. You want that league trophy. You want that state championship. Right. You want it so bad and you're willing to work and suffer for it. And then you don't get it. And that right there, that's amazing. like to have to rise up and keep going.
Yep.
Is
the
great.
resilience that,
Our local football team had an amazing season.
Yeah.
Fantastic season. Like they went from 7th place in league last year to winning league, the district, off to the state semifinals, ended up 3rd in state. Fantastic. 1 loss. Really, really amazing season.
Yeah. How cool is that?
And
But
at
I'm sure
that last game,
crushed.
they got beat up and it was tough. They got knocked out of the playoffs. And
But that's so
my
sad.
mom,
Yeah.
my mom told me, she's like, oh man, I hope there's at least some really good character lessons for them there. At least there's something. I was like, Mom, the character lessons are all in those games. That's where they live. That's where because they didn't have this Nicorette program, like kind of quitting their desire slowly as they had a bad season.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like
perfect
they did
season
awesome.
up until you lose.
You're awesome. And then you're going to lose. And all but one team is going to end on a loss.
Right.
And we met a team that was really tough and really well prepared. We had to play them 9 hours from home, and they did a fantastic job, and we got whooped.
Yeah.
And that's where
I think I've told you this before, but the character line was the thing that I heard all the time because our basketball team was bad, right? So I remember hearing the character line all the time. And I think what it was is, we didn't have the desire.
Yeah.
We did not have. It didn't hurt bad enough.
Yeah.
As far as the losing. I remember, I think this was when I was younger, but I remember a coach losing his temper at us all once. And I think we needed that energy without the lost temper.
Yeah.
That's what we needed, because the shouting was very inspiring, but it needed to be controlled, not the lost temper.
And I think controlling your emotions as a coach, I think, is just massively important.
Right.
It's hugely important because you want that in your players.
Yeah.
You don't want them to have no emotional control. You don't want them to play angry. You don't want them to play scared. You want them to, play with their brain on, really, really keyed up and at 100, but with their brain activated and self-control in place. And if you lose that self-control, then you've lost all credibility to demand it of your players.
Right.
So I should also say, do sports teach you these lessons? No. They will teach you pain. They will teach you joy. They will teach you desire. There's things that will just happen, but they will not necessarily teach you any character lessons by themselves.
You mean they provide the opportunity?
Correct.
They're the
It's
anvil.
the stress test.
Yeah,
it's the stress test that reveals weaknesses.
Yeah.
Are there wildly dysfunctional families and athletes everywhere? Yeah, there are. It's like, did some of them learn how to succeed because they had great coaches? Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
But the sports present you with the opportunity to address a bunch of girls that you would have thought were all completely fine. You put 5 girls on the court together and they're trying to run a man offense, or they're trying to play a zone defense together. And suddenly you start getting cattiness and brattiness, and it starts coming out. It's like, well, you don't have to address it.
Sure.
You could just let it fester. You could just have made everything worse.
You could quit the basketball team.
Yeah. Or you have an opportunity to actually now address something that never would have revealed itself. It never would have showed up. That little hairline crack never would have revealed itself. And I also think there's, for guys, especially in football and basketball and rugby, lacrosse, sports like that, hopefully none of them are going to spend a lot of time in combat. Hopefully we don't have a bunch of wars and we have generations off.
Right.
If we do, sports becomes way less essential.
Right.
It becomes at best entertainment and distraction and escapism, and could be really important there.
Right.
In a time,
but it's not the stress test in a time where we're actually
in a time of actual hardship.
Right.
In a time when a 13-year-old girl is having to get up in the morning and milk a cow and make butter. It's like she doesn't need basketball. She's learning as she's learning.
The question of do your duty and don't complain.
It's like all the stress is there. And so there's different areas of the world and different cultures. I don't think this is the answer. Sports are the answer at all. I think that sports are a fantastic middle class, sort of like this.
Soft lands, right?
Yeah.
We are pretty soft.
Yep. So if we have a very comfortable nation, we all have smartphones.
Yeah.
We all have cars. We all have flat screens.
Yeah.
We're a pretty soft people. So for the middle class and for the posh, sports are fantastic.
Little brother of war.
Yep. And if you go and you're somewhere, where life is much harder, and you watch all the kids playing soccer, they're playing it out of joy and out of an escapism. Right. They're enjoying their speed, enjoying their teammates, enjoying all this, and this opportunity to play and escape. And it's a very different role there than it has in middle class America, where most of us just suck.
Right. We were talking about Kyler Murray, right? So the Arizona Cardinals QB, Gen Z, or is he? Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Gen Z quarterback who's getting insane talent, but had to be stipulated in his contract that he'd watch
game film.
I think 4 hours.
Yeah, it was really small.
4 hours a week of game film.
Getting paid tens of millions of dollars.
And 4 hours in a week is I think, we were just talking about what a
And he wasn't allowed to have anybody watch it for him.
You just like watch someone being like, wow, you didn't learn a thing, dude.
And then people were commenting, like, they did say he was a gamer. Like, everybody knew going into the draft he was a gamer, and that was it. So we'll see what happens with Kyler.
He just came back from injury, so
he's looking okay right now. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, but
what else do we need to cover on sports? I think the girl thing.
I think we addressed it, right?
I mean, like, there's plenty of people out there in the world who would think that I'm a psycho hard right traditionalist, right?
Yep.
It's so easy for people who are red pilling, like reacting away from the world, to overreact and overcorrect.
Yeah.
And people do it all the time. And to overreact into no competition for girls. And we're not doing organized sports for girls. And that's, it really robs them of a huge opportunity to grow and learn.
Right. Cause I don't know if our listeners know this, but you've been criticized for putting some of your girl characters in leather jackets and letting them shoot and ride horses. Like that's the level of criticism that is kind of funny.
Yeah.
It's
Diana Boone was objectionable,
right,
to a lot of people in the Ashdown Burial series because she was a great shot and a pilot and had gone through, all these tiers in Ashdown and achieved this, a level of competence. That was really difficult.
They were hearing girl boss
right
in your Diana Boone description, and you were just hearing excellent woman, excellent woman,
excellent woman, and also would be really terrible with some guys. So she
what do you mean by that?
Meaning that, okay, you pair her with, if she were to go be with a guy who was scared and afraid and had never met a challenge, it would go very, very badly.
Yeah.
So when girls rise up and start achieving, Jael, the wife of Heber level, when they start getting to those tiers, they are selecting to the kinds of guys they need. The kinds of spouse that they could respect and be, yoked alongside of. Two people who could
So you're saying
two people who could be equally yoked and really labor and be productive together for life. Like, she's going to need a bigger, stronger, badder man.
So you're saying Proverbs 31 is wife of a king. If you hit that. You're leveling
wife of
up.
A king or a Viking chieftain.
Sure.
Like Proverbs 31, there's like the kind of guy who would impress and win the love and respect of a woman like that would be some dude.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think that's actually a big piece. So there are plenty of guys who would read a fictional girl character and actually be off put and threatened. It's like, she's more of a man than I'll ever be. It's like, correct. And that's not her fault. That's your fault.
Great. Last one more thing, I think, touching on academics here. Do you approach academics in the same way?
What do you mean?
That ruthless pursuit of excellence, or do you think? Because I've often thought if we're sorting for excellence, then the idea of a tutor is the one that makes sense on the most side, but that's ridiculous in real life, or when I see that play out in real life.
Excellence defined how?
Yeah.
Okay. Excellence in community, excellence in a group, excellence in your generation, among your peers. Yes. Excellence just is the only goal. excellence at Latin. No,
Gotcha.
the goal is not excellence at Latin. The goal is to be excellent in anything that's in front of you, and you attack it. But you also attack it among your peers.
So you're saying that
in community and
the self-selecting for SAT or whatever, SAT grades, that's not how you're defining excellence.
no, it's one measurement.
Right.
So if I have a kid who's getting grades that are worse than they could be getting, then yeah, we have an excellence conversation for sure.
Right.
Because they're supposed to strive and aim and work for it. I don't want them getting A's, that they could just grab easily either. If they are, then I will and have in the past ramped it up and made it harder for my kids on purpose.
Yeah.
So enrolling my son in additional like college online classes while he's in high school, doing that my daughter's freshman year, adding extra courses online and other stuff.
Yeah. Just making sure they don't take.
Yeah. So like freshman year at NSA for my daughter was like, okay, you're going to take a harder Latin than this because you've already got this. So we're going to do this online intermediate Latin through Harvard, and we're going to add that here. I want your STEM brain still suffering. So we're going to add calculus, so you're doing calculus and adding this harder Latin to your load because she was really capable. A kid who wasn't as capable as she was, I wouldn't have done that.
Okay. Gotcha.
So if you can just achieve it without strain, then I don't think it's enough.
Right. Okay. So what I'm getting around to is that people often balance the sports and the academics, oppose the sports and the academics. Why is that? Why is that kind of the ultimate tension that seems to happen? Maybe this is just middle-class America.
I don't know. It's also part of the old mind-body like duality mistake. There's the real you.
Right.
Like for a lot of more academic think you types, and there's the fake you, the you that needs to eat and sleep and do things physically. So there's, I have a couple kids, out of my 5 who would be happy just working on their own thing in a dark room. Like don't need people, would forget to eat, would forget to sleep, would just like be obsessive in pursuing things. That's not better. That's not and they would achieve a level of excellence in that thing they're pursuing, but they would not have been out there as a balanced human, and I think that's, that's important. So I don't see them as opposites at all. I think that pursuing them with the same kind of desire to do your best and to find your best and to set the goal a little out of reach, so that you actually have to struggle and you might not get there, but you will, because you set the goal a little bit, away from you, you will actually achieve more than you would have if you had just aimed at something obviously achievable.
Right.
So a little bit unachievable.
Yeah.
I think Bobby Knight, famous for his self-control.
I was rereading a bunch of Bobby Knight quotes.
Bobby Knight, recently deceased, legendary Indiana coach who also like hit a player and threw a chair and got fired.
Right.
So he had issues, but in a coaching seminar, he asked a kid how high he could jump and made the kid jump and touch the wall. And then he just taped a $20 bill 3 inches higher than that. And was like, it's yours if you can touch it. And shock of shocks, the kid figured out how to touch it. And he told the group, is like, that's all it is. That's all coaching is finding the right motivations and reward systems. Now for him, it also turned into obsession and rage and lots of other things. But that's very true. Just put it out in front of them.
Right.
And I've always played that way with kids. I always play with rewards.
Yeah.
It really works. It works really well. So risk reward is if you set those carrots out there and are motivated by them, but there's also the stick behind you.
Right.
So last year I did a thing with my basketball team where it's like, okay, any kid who hit 20 free throws in a row, went 20 for 20 twice, like I will contribute like a couple $100 to your shoes.
Nice.
It's like, that's actually hard. Like
That's very hard.
going 20 for 20 twice. And I think I kind of regretted it a little bit because
did the stick come to hit the coach?
But I had enough guys achieve it. I think only 4, but it was like, oof, okay, great. But, but I still was happy. And those guys hit their free throws that season.
Right.
But overwhelmingly, what I also had was a bunch of guys who decided, that's too hard. And then didn't even try.
Yeah.
Didn't even try and were terrible from the free throw line all year. And I was hoping I was going to get an obsessed group just shooting in lunch hour and,
right.
off times, and the whole team would shoot well, but they didn't. We did not shoot well. So this year we're trying the stick, and it's just as a team, we shoot free throws and run for misses at the end of every single practice.
Nice.
And we do it in a group, kind of like I described the football thing. Yeah. Everybody's on the key. Each guy spends a turn shooting 2. And then the guys who miss both run first. The guys who miss 1 run first, and then everybody else finishes. But there's a bit of like public shame and letting each other down, and that camaraderie,
just all that healthy stuff.
And so we're gonna test that one. And so maybe next year it might be a combination of like carrot and stick.
Yeah.
But I know what the carrot got me last year. This year we're gonna see what the stick does.
That's great. So I think we finished then with that's sports plus academics make a perfect blend. They're not in opposition at all. They go along nicely together.
No, they really don't oppose each other. But I will say, just to leave everybody hanging on something annoying, if I had to pick between a lot of my classroom lessons and my court/field lessons, I would pick my court field lessons any day. Like they were way more operational as human being lessons that then applied to the classroom and to my writing and to my pursuit of the arts. Like those lessons have stayed with me through everything.
Did you do the same thing where you didn't learn from the classroom lesson, even though you're in the situation? I'm just wondering, like with our sports situations where you can learn and didn't.
Yeah.
Is it a similar thing with classroom, do you think? Or do you think it's much?
Absolutely, but it doesn't hit you the same way.
Yeah, for sure.
The consequences don't come home to roost as quickly.
Yeah.
So, and I look back, and it's easy to look back and criticize 17-year-old me, and just be like, oh, what a turkey.
Yeah.
Like, what a turkey. But just, and again, I just see like the lack, like a thoughtlessness in how I pursued it and everything else.
Oh, totally. But, I think that's what it is to be older.
Yeah, but you're young and you don't understand how time passes, and you don't understand preparation.
Don't understand you're not going to reread that thing later.
Yeah. Yeah.
You always are like, oh, I could go reread that later.
I could reread it later. And you won't. But the thing that's funny is I feel that way more about the sports lessons. There's a lot of hard life lessons that when I am looking at an opportunity to write a project or to jump into a show or try to, when I'm trying to find a way to finish The Silent Bells, I'm working towards that. I'm drawing on all these lessons that I learned not in classrooms. None of the lessons from classrooms are helping me.
Yeah.
When I'm building the mythology of Ashtown, the classroom lessons help me. The information, the breadth, Thucydides and Herodotus are helping me.
Sure.
When I'm doing that, Latin helps me.
But the grit
in the actual content that shows up on the page, like the content of the meal, education helps.
Right.
The ability to put it on the page, to pull 5 weeks of 3 to 4 a.m. nights in a row to finish a project. It's like something like that. That's all sports lessons.
Yeah.
That I draw on. So it is kind of like what's the content of what you're going to make, what you're going to do, the content of your thoughts, the content of your desires is very much informed by academics in the classroom. Your ability to act on them and to achieve is heavily informed by your discipline athletically.
That's a good distinction.
Yeah, there we go. Distinction made.
We did it.
We did it. We're done. We've talked about sports again. Do not rip your girls off of their life lessons.
Yeah, do you think?
And I would add one thing. If they hate sports, same thing with a guy. If they really hate it, I'm not advocating for people to force their kids to play. Like that is a key question I should have asked. It's a trickier little thing. I'm not saying that would be like ad hoc. There could be times it'd be like, yep, you're playing, kid. You're doing it. because we're gonna learn this. We're gonna learn this lesson. But I would say the same thing about kids learning piano.
Right.
Like as a parent, you're deciding, no, you're in piano lessons, but at some point, you forcing this on them is not kindness or helpful.
Yeah.
It doesn't help in their growth. But early on, like, yeah, you're going to learn to play piano. You're going to learn to read music. That was important to us with our kids. They all did, and we got them to that level where they could all read music, and none of them really loved piano, and none of them really continued with it. Except for tinkering, themselves. They'll want to play a hymn or they want to figure out a song, and they all can, but none of them are pianists. Right.
Right.
But they all got the benefit of that. I feel that way about sports.
Gotcha.
I'm not trying to raise a bunch of professional athletes. I'm not trying to raise professional pianists. I'm trying to raise well-rounded kids. But I let my daughter quit violin. I didn't make her do it. And sports were similar.
Yeah.
So my kids all wanted to. And so the big thing for me was that you weren't allowed in our house to want something and not act on it. Like you need to actually want it with your actions. You don't want it with your feels and with your words.
That's a good lesson.
Like want with your actions. If you want it, show me your want. Show me the desire. You want to run fast? Show me how much you want to run fast. Don't tell me. Just prove it. But if you have a kid who, loves to draw, really, really loves to draw and is not coordinated and hates the suffering of sports, I still think it's really valuable, especially when they're little. But at a certain point, the last thing in the world you want to do is ruin your relationship with your kid by making them do something that just sucks. Right. And they've gotten the lesson. They've learned the lesson. Right. Move on.
Right.
Right. Move on. They can read music. It's okay if they stop playing piano. They don't have to be pianists.
Right.
And finding that balance is really, really key. So,
yeah. I mean, in parenting, there are multiple ways to teach that same stress lesson.
Yeah.
Right.
But forcing stuff on your kid instead of planted the seeds of love and desire, whether it's for baking bread or playing basketball, you making that choice and imposing it on them is really dangerous. It always is.
I'll have to add a little tag in the description that says, make sure you listen to the last. Make sure you listen to the
whole
minutes.
thing, because that's where we took prisoners. That's where we made a big qualification.
Right, absolutely.
This is not quite No Quarter November. This is not my dad's blog. This is Hearts and Mind podcast.
Hearts and Mind podcast episode.
Hearts and Minds
1.
Plural minds. We want all your minds and all your hearts. That's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to win friends. We just want you to like us.
It could be called the Win Friends and Influence People podcast.
Just like us, please. That's all. I did promise movie reco.
Oh yeah.
So an old one that we like in our house is Finding Forrester. And it's
chess movie?
No.
Not at all. Dang it.
It's got lost in there. It's a basketball and writing movie. So it's been a favorite in our house for a while. So Finding Forrester, and it's a good little movie that we enjoy. We enjoy and have enjoyed as a family.
Nice.
So Gus Van Sant and Sean Connery starring. And it is the reason why I like it, obviously, is because it does walk this line of like artist athlete. Like, how do you, the way our society tries to pigeonhole people and you're just artistic. And it's it's a little bit old, so it kind of walks a little more naturally around some of the race issues and doesn't just park in the woke the way stuff does right now, but it doesn't pretend like it's not real either. It's not, it's a good film. Basically it's a good movie. Finding Forrester. I don't know where the filters are or how many it needs, but you should check because you're parents and you take responsibility.
Is that our next lamp pick?
I don't know that we'll talk about it. I don't think it's more of a reco. I don't think it merits a whole episode. It's more of just a thing we'll touch on. And I get asked, so I said I get asked about sports a lot. I do. The other thing I get asked the most is for movie recommends. So there's a movie recommend, one that's most people aren't already aware of. It's kind of one of those sneaky ones. A ton of people were grateful for the Escape from Pretoria recommend. And we'll keep looking for them.
Awesome.
So there we go.
We'll find
the nuggets at the end. The nuggies at the end. Don't force your kids to play sports and watch Finding Forrester. Do force them to watch Finding Forrester.
Perfect.
See ya.
If you are a longtime listener to the Stories of Soul Food podcast, then you know that I am the proud dad of 5 boys, and only 5 boys, which means we talk a lot, my wife and I, about how to raise sons. That's what made me so excited when I heard that Canon Plus was releasing the Future Men Raising Boys to Fight Giants documentary parenting series. 5 episodes of parenting goodness from a bunch of different voices, teaching your sons how to be the heroes that our culture need. In fact, they're probably going to be more like King David than you would be comfortable with. Join canonplus.com, check out Future Men, all episodes. Episode 1, The Road to Masculinity. 2, A Call for Fathers. 3, The Boy Against Himself. 4, Boys in Sports. 5, Boys and Stories. That right there, Future Men documentary series. I wanted to share it with you in case, like me, you have a number of boys in your life who are at some point going to become future men.